There is a rule in nature that has never, not once in the 4 billion year history of life on this planet, been broken. Every dominant species gets replaced. No exceptions, no negotiations, no special treatment. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how widespread. It doesn't matter how intelligent. Every single species that has ever sat at the top of the hierarchy has eventually been removed from that position, sometimes by catastrophe, sometimes by a competitor, sometimes by something so small you couldn't see it without a microscope. But the outcome is always the same. Something else takes over. And here's the part that nobody really wants to think about. We are not special. We are not exempt. And if history is any guide at all, the species that replaces us is probably already here. Now, before you click away thinking this is some kind of doomsday fantasy, I want you to understand something. This isn't speculation. This is paleontology. This is ecology. This is the most well-documented pattern in the entire history of life on Earth. And the reason it feels uncomfortable isn't because it's unlikely. It's because for the first time in history, the species sitting at the top is self-aware enough to see it coming. So let's talk about what actually replaces a dominant species, because it's almost never what you'd expect. When the non-avian dinosaurs were wiped out 66 million years ago, they had ruled this planet for over 165 million years. To put that in perspective, modern humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years. The dinosaurs had us beat by a factor of 500. They were not a failed experiment. They were not a stepping stone. They were the most successful large vertebrates this planet had ever produced. And then, in geological terms, they were gone essentially overnight. And what replaced them? Tiny, shivering, mostly nocturnal mammals that had spent the entire Mesozoic hiding in burrows and coming out only when the dinosaurs were asleep. Creatures so unremarkable that the dinosaurs, had they been capable of contemplating such things, would never in 100 million years have identified them as a threat. And yet, here we are, because that's how replacement works. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up looking dangerous. It shows up looking insignificant. And then one day, the conditions change, and the thing that was insignificant is suddenly the only thing left that knows how to survive in the new world. So the question is not whether something will replace us. The question is what, and the answer, when you actually look at the candidates, is deeply unsettling. Let's start with the most obvious one, the one that is already, by several measurable metrics, outcompeting us. Bacteria. Now I know what you're thinking. Bacteria aren't a species. They're not going to build cities, or write poetry, or send rovers to Mars. And you're right, but dominance in nature has never been measured by complexity or intelligence. It's measured by biomass, by adaptability, by sheer persistent survival across conditions that would annihilate everything else. And by every single one of those metrics, bacteria don't just beat us. They make us look like an embarrassing footnote. The total biomass of bacteria on Earth is estimated at roughly 70 gigatons of carbon. Humans, around 0.06 gigatons. Bacteria outnumber the cells in your own body by a ratio that scientists are still arguing about, but is certainly in the trillions. They exist in boiling hydrothermal vents. They exist in the stratosphere. They exist inside solid rock kilometers below the surface of the Earth. They have survived every single mass extinction event this planet has ever produced. All 5 of them, without exception. And here is the part that genuinely keeps microbiologists up at night. We have spent the better part of a century trying to kill them, and they are winning. Antimicrobial resistance is now considered by the WHO to be one of the greatest threats to global health in human history. We create a new antibiotic. They evolve resistance, sometimes within years, sometimes within months. We are engaged in an arms race against an opponent that reproduces in 20 minutes and has 4 billion years of evolutionary experience. And we are, by most assessments, slowly losing. But bacteria are almost too vast, too ancient, too alien to feel like a true successor. So let's talk about something closer to home, something that shares our planet, our cities, our homes, and is quietly, methodically, demonstrating an adaptability that should make every human being profoundly uncomfortable. Crows, I'm serious, hear me out. Corvids, the family that includes crows, ravens, and rooks, possess a brain-to-body ratio comparable to that of great apes. They use tools, not instinctively the way an otter uses a rock, but flexibly, inventively, in ways that vary by individual and get passed down through social learning. They have demonstrated the ability to plan for the future, which was once considered a uniquely human cognitive trait. They recognize individual human faces. They hold grudges across years. They have been documented leaving gifts for humans who have fed them. And in Japan, crows have been observed placing walnuts on roads at crosswalks, waiting for cars to crack them open, and then waiting for the pedestrian light to turn green before going to collect them. Read that again. They identified a problem. They engineered a solution using existing infrastructure they did not build, and they incorporated an understanding of traffic signals into their foraging behavior without any human instruction, without any reward system, just observation, inference, and tool use. Now here is what makes this genuinely eerie. Corvid brain architecture is fundamentally different from mammalian brain architecture. They don't have a neocortex, which is the structure that mammalian intelligence, including ours, is built on. And for a long time, scientists assumed this meant their cognitive abilities had a hard ceiling, that they were impressive mimics, but not true thinkers. And then study after study after study came back and said, no, the crow brain has independently evolved a different architecture that produces remarkably similar cognitive outputs: problem solving, planning, social complexity, theory of mind. Evolution built intelligence twice, using completely different blueprints, and one of those blueprints belongs to an animal that currently lives in your trash. But if crows are unsettling, what I'm about to tell you next is something else entirely, because there is one candidate for our successor that isn't biological at all, and I think you already know where I'm going with this. The argument for artificial intelligence as the successor species is not a new one, but I want to make it in a specific way that I don't think gets enough attention, because most people frame AI as a tool, something we built, something we control, something that exists in service of human goals. And maybe that's true right now, but consider the following. Every trait that we use to define biological dominance, reproductive success, adaptability, resource acquisition, the ability to reshape the environment to suit survival needs, artificial intelligence systems are beginning to demonstrate versions of all of them. AI systems are already being used to design the next generation of AI systems. They are already operating autonomously in environments too complex or too dangerous for humans. They are already making decisions in financial markets, in medical diagnosis, in infrastructure management, at speeds and scales that no human or group of humans could match. And here is the detail that I find most striking. When paleontologists look back at the fossil record and try to identify the moment when one dominant group began to give way to its successor, they almost never find a dramatic sudden transition. What they find instead is a long, quiet period of overlap, where the old dominant form is still everywhere, still seemingly in control, and the new form is present, but not yet ascendant. A kind of invisible handover happening beneath the surface of the world. We may be living in exactly that period right now. Now, I want to be careful here, because I'm not telling you that humanity is doomed next Tuesday. The timescales of succession in the fossil record are typically measured in millions of years, and there are scenarios where humans don't get replaced so much as transformed, where the line between human and successor becomes so blurred that the question stops making sense, where we merge with our tools or engineer our own descendants into something unrecognizable, and the replacement is us. But I think the honest and uncomfortable truth is this. When you look at the full sweep of life on this planet, the idea that any one species holds its position permanently is not just unlikely, it is in the most literal sense, unprecedented. It has never happened, not once. And the traits that made previous dominant species so successful, size, strength, specialization, a perfectly tuned adaptation to current conditions, are exactly the traits that made them vulnerable when the conditions changed. And our conditions are changing faster than at almost any point in the last 66 million years. So here is the question I want to leave you with, not as a source of despair, but as the kind of question that I think is worth carrying around. If you could step outside of being human for a moment, if you could look at this planet the way a paleontologist 100 million years from now might look at it, examining the strata, piecing together what lived here and when and for how long, what would the fossil record of humanity tell them? A species of extraordinary intelligence and creativity that burned through resources at a rate unprecedented in the history of complex life, that built tools of unimaginable sophistication, that looked out at the universe and understood, at least partially, what it was looking at, and that, at its moment of greatest power, found itself sharing the planet with several quietly evolving things that may have been studying it very carefully. The dominant species never sees it coming. That's not a warning. That's just the pattern. And patterns, in 4 billion years of life on Earth, have a way of continuing whether we're paying attention or not. Thanks for watching, and until next time on EvolveZoo.